Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Israel targets Hamas leaders in Qatar after the group takes responsibility for the Jerusalem shooting, but a Hamas official says its senior leaders survived. The White House denies links to the Jeffrey Epstein drawing as the sex trafficker's birthday book files are made public. And Nepal's Prime Minister resigns as deadly protests and unrest grip the capital. Now, a Hamas official says its senior leaders survived a targeted attack by Israel in Doha during ceasefire negotiations. Israeli media say collective heads Khalil al-Hayya and Zaher Jabrin are among those hit. While speaking at a news conference after the strikes, Netanyahu said that the war in Gaza can be ended immediately if US President Donald Trump's peace proposal is accepted. To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri Pickett, and Correspondent and Columnist Gemma White. Michael, let's start with you. So we've had a lot of developments on the story today, coming in thick and fast, hours after that strike we saw on Doha. I mean, what is the situation right now? Where does this leave us? You know, were these strikes inevitably going to happen? Now what's the situation on the international stage?
You know, we've had a couple of senior Israeli ministers talk about I would say from the beginning of the year, talking about how they are not just going after Hamas leadership in Gaza, but they know that there will be Hamas leadership, you know, in different parts of the world. And they're prepared to target them. Now, that was strong language, and maybe we should have taken it more seriously. But the thought that there would have been an attack like this, you know, on the mediating host country, they were asked in 2011 by the US to play host to Hamas. And for them to be attacked, you wouldn't have thought that that's something that Israel would have done. But now it becomes, I've heard one analyst say, I think rightly so, and fairly, that Israel has become a bit of a destabilizing actor in the region. And since October 7th, you could easily come up, well, there are 5 countries, right, that Israel has attacked. So of course there's Iran, and then there's Yemen, and now Qatar, and then Syria and Lebanon, and then of course Gaza. And you wonder, at what point does Israel either put a rein on themselves and change their course of action, or we know the only man who can do it is Donald Trump. At what point does he come in and say to the Israelis, enough, this has to happen? And until that conversation takes place, I think that Israel will continue to do what Israel thinks is best for Israel.
I think we reached enough quite a while ago as well, didn't we? The line just keeps getting moved further and further. Yeah.
Absolutely, it does, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, the international community will speak about how they condemn it, but until there are concrete actions to actually hit Israel where it hurts, economically, for instance, the trade issue, of course, boycotting Israel products, some of these issues that have been bubbling under the surface that are traditionally thought of as a little bit too outside the conventional box, maybe some of those conversations have to take place.
Yeah. But what is also interesting is, you know, Netanyahu pretty much confirmed that they had, you know, orchestrated this attack as soon as it did happen in Doha, and we got those false reports of a strike happening. And he has said Israel has delivered a great blows to the axis of evil. So Israel clearly not changing their stance when it comes to Hamas, and they have stuck to this since the October the 7th attack. But Gemma, Qatar has condemned the attacks today, and much of the world has too. too, in many ways.
Yeah, do you know what? I've not heard "Axis of Evil" for like a long time. That's like an old school kind of soundbite, right?
It is.
Yeah, so Qatar has strongly condemned what it calls a cowardly attack and a criminal assault, one which constitutes a blatant violation of all international laws and norms. And that is a recurring theme, as we'll see throughout what so many countries have said. This is against international law, what they've done. So, a spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said, while the state of Qatar strongly condemns this assault, it confirms that it will not tolerate this reckless Israeli behaviour and the ongoing disruption of regional security, nor any act that targets its security and sovereignty. So, they've got their investigations underway, of course. Now, several Arab nations have also come out in support of Qatar. We have Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan and Oman, Kuwait, Turkey and the Arab League also. I feel that the region has never been more united. It's just a shame that they had to be united behind something like this. Also, the UN called it a flagrant violation of Doha's sovereignty and praised Qatar, as we said, for its role so far in hosting negotiations. And yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is the building, you know, like destroyed. So there's so much. There's so much that the region has come together behind Qatar, but the strength of feeling, I think, is quite surprising. I knew there would be a lot, but there has been much more than I thought.
And, you know, it's not just the countries you named there. We're also seeing European
Across
countries.
Europe, yeah.
You know, we've seen Germany. They've come out and condemned it. France have come out and condemned it. The UK have come out and condemned Israel's strike on Qatar today. And I think that, as you did say, there seems to be this unity, and Israel is almost being more and more shut out, as what you were saying, Michael, you know, almost becoming destabilizing, and other countries are now actually saying, okay, united, we say the same thing and we condemn these attacks more. But the US is a big player in this, and we obviously can't forget that. We did hear from the White House today. Caroline Leavitt did come out and she did speak. And I thought her language was quite interesting in what they said. You know, Witkoff was told to inform Qataris of a pending attack. They found out just before the attack was due to happen. And then obviously Israel came out early and said, no, the US had given us the green light. But then language seemed to change in that press conference. The US seemed to say, oh no, we're more distanced from this and we're really upset it happened on Qatar's soil. It's something we didn't want to happen. We did inform them. So it seems to be what's happening in that situation.
And Netanyahu backed that up as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
This is our sole responsibility. No one else is involved. So you wonder what communication went on there for him to come out and say that as well.
I think it puts the U.S. in an incredibly difficult position because they have two allies. They need to protect the Qataris and their largest Air Force base in the region. In fact, their largest military base in the Middle East is in Qatar. Which begs the question, what are they doing there if not to protect the country and its assets? But that's a question for another day. And then, of course, the U.S. is also a very strong ally, arguably Israel's strongest ally. And you have one ally attacking another ally. And of course, we also know that it was the Qataris who had given Donald Trump the jet this year as well. So Donald Trump is stuck in a very difficult position where he needs to defend the actions of the Israelis, and he also has to somehow placate the irritation of the Qataris, rightly so, all because, and the Qataris can say this, you asked us to host, you know, Hamas back in 2011 when Barack Obama was president. And now this has come back to backfire on us. And the whole reason Hamas is here is so that the negotiating process can actually be more effective and smoother.
So I hear what you're saying, but Israel's argument to that, and I did speak to a former Israeli MP earlier today, and their argument to that is the fact that Qatar have been funding the Hamas war machine. And that's something that Benjamin Netanyahu also said in his speech today. But
So I would say, pardon me for interrupting you, I would say Israel will say many of these things, much like when they kill journalists, but they don't have the evidence. They never put the proof forward so that the public can properly disseminate and then say, oh, yes, actually what Israel is saying is true. They'll just come out with the accusation and then they'll leave it there.
But actually, it's quite interesting if we talk about, what's going to stop Netanyahu in many ways and rein him in, because earlier I spoke to Errol Moorcoach, spokesperson for Republicans overseas and defense intelligence expert. I asked him whether or not the strike dilutes Trump's influence over Netanyahu, or if Trump is the only one that can actually change his mind. Take a listen.
I think you're absolutely correct in saying that Donald Trump is the only person left who can talk to Bibi Netanyahu. He's the only person who understands perhaps how to deal with somebody like him, and as well, he's the only person who's willing to use the power of the U.S. purse strings and the power of the office in a way that has opposed him before. And while everybody sometimes thinks that Donald Trump is playing to Netanyahu's fiddle, very much Bibi Netanyahu aligns his interests with the general U.S. strategic alliance, and then very conveniently is included in that situation. So going forward, I think the only person who can stop this catastrophe from getting worse is Donald Trump. He's the only person who has that humanitarian spirit inside of him there. I don't think anybody else in the region is committed to lives and just in the concept of lives. Obviously, Bibi Netanyahu has his own goals and own tangible goals that aren't aligning, I don't think, with the U.S. strategic interest. And as much as Israel is an independent country, they are in many ways a vassal state of the U.S. hegemonic empire. Without the U.S. Navy, there is no Israel. In 6 months, the country functionally would not be there. It cannot defend itself without the United States, which gives the United States a tremendous amount of leverage in these negotiations.
So, Gemma, I think that's a question that many people have been asking. Who really holds the cards in this relationship between Israel and the US? Errol made it clear there it was the US, but the next 24 hours are pretty crucial in this situation.
Well, we're not seeing this, are we, really, I don't think? We're not seeing that the US is a nation that holds all the cards in this situation. Otherwise, would this even have happened if they were in charge of the whole thing? I think Trump as well has got so much else going on, with Ukraine, with what's happening domestically as well, with the Epstein files. There is just so many demands on his attention right now. You have to wonder if, his focus is divided.
And I think that is a really fair point, isn't it? Because Donald Trump has desperately been trying to push for the ceasefire. And I don't think any of us can argue that any other way. But it's been a lot more difficult than I think was ever previously thought. And on Sunday, many of us thought a ceasefire was actually pretty close, Michael.
Yeah, and Donald Trump came out and he seemed to be optimistic on Sunday that there was a deal that he thought was going to actually come true. Hamas had given indications that they were interested in signing. They were, I think, getting pressure from the Turkish delegation as well as the Qatari delegation and the U.S. And so I think that they started to see that not only is the situation in Gaza terrible, but the pressure now is being placed on the leadership. You have to sort of sort this out as soon as possible. But I think the bigger issue right now for the U.S. is what message does this send to the other allies in the Gulf? When maybe the security concerns or the security guarantees that the U.S. would have, are those still going to stand if Israel decides to attack another U.S. ally? Anwar Gargash, who is an advisor to the UAE president, as well as the UAE foreign minister, Sheikh Abdullah, both came out very strongly condemning this. And the UAE has diplomatic relations with Israel.
And I think this is a lot of concern. Many people are asking that question, Michael. And also, what does this mean for the Abraham Accords? Something that was worked on, that was really trying to get relations normalized in the region, and where does this all stand now? And I think these are the big questions that a lot of people are asking themselves, and what the answers are, and of course what the answer is for the people in Gaza. Because we know the Gaza City offensive is imminent, and it seems to be that we've got more questions than we have answers at the moment, but thank you so much for your analysis on that. Let's move on to another story. And files from a Jeffrey Epstein birthday book have been released, showing a number of tributes to the late sex trafficker. The documents include a hand-drawn picture signed by Donald. Addressing the image on X, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt said the president did not draw this picture, nor did he sign it. You mentioned the Epstein files there, something that's just not going away, is it, Gemma? But what do these documents reveal? And why now? Why are we seeing the birthday book essentially being released?
Yeah, we're seeing them now because last month the House Oversight Committee, they issued a legal summons to the Epstein estate to hand over much more documentation, and the lawyers sent these documents. So they are redacted still. You know, there are certain names that are blurred out, blackened out. There are faces that have been, you know, blackened out as well. So they're still not the full documents, but, you know, it's what people have been asking for. This is the birthday book. It was compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell and given to Epstein on his 50th birthday, and it's a collection of messages from friends, acquaintances, people that he knew. Obviously, Trump allegedly offered this message that has gone in the book. The final line of it, which says, a pal is a wonderful thing, happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret, which is quite an intriguing thing to write, irrespective of who's written it. Why would a day be a wonderful secret? Also, you have Lord Mandelson, who is the current UK ambassador to Washington. He's been in politics for a very long time. And he called Mandelson, allegedly called Epstein, his best pal, in a note that was allegedly written by him, called him mysterious as well, this mysterious man who parachuted into my life. Bill Clinton, a message allegedly from Bill Clinton, noted Epstein's childlike curiosity and drive to make a difference. Now, what's been most interesting, and people I think were looking out for this, there's no apparent messages from Prince Andrew, who would obviously have been, you know, he's been such a focal point of anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein. But there are entries from an unidentified woman in the book who thanked Epstein for meeting the Prince, Bill Clinton and Trump, and said that thanks to him she had seen the private quarters of Buckingham Palace and sat on the Queen of England's throne. So the tentacles of this book keep getting further and further, and their reach is quite extraordinary.
It's absolutely extraordinary. It's absolutely fascinating, this Epstein files. It doesn't seem to be going away, as you said. And, you know, Lord Mandelson, of course, part of the British government, it's now transatlantic. You know, this whole situation is taking us to places I'm sure none of us ever believed we could go. Donald Trump, though, the political fallout so far is them just flatly denying it, and we know that he's saying absolutely didn't write this birthday card that was in this book, and it's been denial. What next, really? Is this sort of the dripping tap?
Yes, it is the dripping tap, and it's a nice analogy. And you have the estate, which could release more files. You have the lawyer who's representing the more than 200 victims who could come forward and say whatever they're going to say. And they may get sued as a result, but they may take that chance. You have the Democrats who are demanding more information from the Attorney General. You also have certain Republican MAGA politicians who are also demanding, Marjorie Taylor Greene is one, who are very much saying release, release, release. And there are it's not as though it's one tap that's dripping, right? All your taps in your house are dripping nonstop. And this is the issue that Donald Trump has to somehow, you know, it's as though he has one pan and he has to go under each one and catch each drop. And it's an impossible task.
But also, I think there has to be an argument here, and some people would say this, yes, they are the victims, but also, is it trial by media for some of these people who've been named in the birthday book? You mentioned, allegedly, Bill Clinton, Lord Mandelson, Donald Trump, some very high-profile names. We actually are looking at it from a lens of, you know, Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex trafficker. But not everyone who knew him, it's fair to say, was involved in anything lewd or sordid or knew about anything. So I think even the media, in some respects, has to be a little bit careful when people, you know, have this trial by media, they're guilty, but they actually haven't faced any trial.
So I'm going to go ahead,
Yeah,
and I'm sorry. While I remember, I think what's important, PR 101, get ahead of the story, own the narrative. And if that's the case, and XYZ knows that he had a relationship with Epstein, and he knows his or her name is probably in the book, why not come out? Which is another area, another line of offense that Donald Trump might have to defend against if some people come out and start saying, I actually did have a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I invested a lot of money with him through his ties with JP Morgan, and we made a lot of money, but I never went to the island. I never was on his plane. Or I was on his plane, but I was traveling to Europe. This is, I think, it's a little bit surprising that Bill Clinton hasn't come out, that Bill Gates hasn't come out, that some of these other people who are huge names haven't come out. And it just begs the question, why?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the mega base and the conspiracy theorists get incredibly upset.
Did they think as well, like Trump seemed to think, that it would just go away if they all kept very quiet about it?
Well, I think a lot of people thought, especially in Hollywood movies, right, when that main guy who is the kingpin dies, everybody thinks it'll go away.
Yeah.
And hopefully the little black book, which was one of the documents that was turned over, this was an address book, contact book, that was almost stretching 30 years.
Yeah.
And the names that would have been in that, I'm sure we would have known many of them. And I think most people would thought, oh, he's dead, it's over, and thank goodness I've dodged that bullet, we can move on.
Yeah. I think with your point about trial by media as well, oftentimes that's the only trial that victims get. They sometimes, if they don't get their day in court, the very fact that they can see that there are repercussions and there are consequences, then that means a lot to them. So, yeah, they don't have the voice or the platform that the rich and powerful do.
Yeah, and I think that's been a big talking point throughout this, you know, the establishment against the victims. And I think this will carry on being a huge conversation. But, you know, there is a lot of argument that Donald Trump said he would release the Epstein files when he was campaigning to become president, and that still hasn't happened. And that's something his MAGA base do really want. I don't think that's a story we'll stop discussing somehow. Thanks for your thoughts on that. Let's move on now. And Nepal's Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, has stepped down amid massive street protests in the country's capital. The former leader says he hopes his resignation will help resolve unrest. Yesterday, security forces fired on demonstrators, killing at least 19, while Kathmandu International Airport is now closed due to the violence. Patrick Falk reports.
In Nepal's capital of Kathmandu, the unrest continued, with protesters setting tyres alight to block traffic. Anger against the government showed no signs of abating following deadly clashes with police the day before. Demonstrators marched, chanting slogans in defiance of a curfew imposed on several districts. Once again, clashes erupted with the police, with people hurling stones at them. They responded by firing tear gas. Still, the protesters refused to back off. Once this government resigns, this man says, today's movement will gradually come to an end. Under increasing pressure, that's precisely what happened. With the situation spiraling, KP Sharma Oli stepped down, saying he did so to bring an end to the crisis. He took over as Nepal's leader in July last year, his fourth time in office, with the backing of the Nepali Congress Party. The protests were triggered by a social media ban imposed last week. It followed a campaign shining a light on the lavish lifestyles of politicians' children and allegations of corruption. Late on Monday, authorities rolled back the restrictions in response to the backlash. But it failed to quell the demonstrations. The Prime Minister's resignation plunges the poverty-stricken Himalayan country into fresh political uncertainty. And protesters still don't appear to be ready to let up. Here, they're seen setting ablaze the homes of other ministers. Reports say the residences of several high-profile politicians came under attack. Meanwhile, the army has posted an appeal on social media asking people to exercise restraint. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya English.
Michael, we can't deny the pictures we've just seen in Patrick Falk's report there are absolutely shocking, but is there any sort of sign of these protests easing? And we do know that protesters obviously lost their lives.
You know, whenever you see security forces with batons and shields running away from the crowds, you know it's a bad situation. And that's a lot of what we saw over the last 24 hours. I don't think that there's any sign or indication that things are going to slow down. The reason is it's systemic corruption that's at the heart of it. The social media ban, that was, I think, what triggered a lot of it. But there are too many issues that have affected too many people for far too long. Unemployment is far too high. It's at about 12%.
And the corruption.
And the corruption. And you know, one government leaves and the new government comes in and they play the game to keep themselves in power for as long as possible, but nothing has really changed. It's the cliche that gets leveled at a lot of governments around the world, which is they're just doing what they can to maintain the status quo as long as they're part of the status quo.
And you know, Gemma is a Nepalese lady who works here at Al Arabiya with us, and yesterday she was very upset, and I was talking to her about the situation that's happening in Kathmandu where her family is, and she was beside herself because she hadn't actually been able to be in touch with her parents for nearly a month, because that's how people keep in touch with their families. It's through social media. It's through the likes of Facebook, Snapchat, WhatsApp. And for that to all be shut down and for people to be completely isolated from their families abroad. And, you know, does this protest go beyond social media? And, you know, will things actually change in time?
Yeah, it goes way beyond social media. And as you've pointed out, social media isn't just posting pictures, you know, of your lunch for people to like. It's communicating, it's gathering, it's bringing people together, it's exchanging information, it's families staying in contact. As you said, unemployment plays a massive factor here, especially among young people, 15 to 24. That's at 20.8%. Also, migration, they're seeing that there's a brain drain in the country because people have to go abroad in order to earn money to send back. And what's interesting is that remittances counts for 1/3 of Nepal's GDP.
That's huge.
Nepo kids as well. There's a lot of anger in the country about the children of politicians and powerful people in the country who have been on social media showing off their wealth, showing off their holidays, showing off what they've bought. And there's a feeling that they are using money that's been given to them through ill-gotten gains. So Nepo kids has been trending quite a lot across the region. And the corruption, systemic corruption, as you said, that just doesn't seem to change government after government.
And I think a lot of people feel like we're in Nepal, we're paying taxes, and our taxes is not actually going to bettering the country. It's going to line the pockets of those who are already in power. But thank you so much for your thoughts on those protests there in Nepal. Let's move on to another story now. And the number of sick days taken by workers in the UK has reached its highest level for 15 years. A survey also found that employees have taken almost 2 full working weeks off sick over the past 12 months. Gemma, you know, why has sickness leave reached an all-time high? And I mean, should any of us be surprised at all by these statistics?
This is interesting. So pre-pandemic, the average sick leave was just over a week in the UK.
Yes.
Now, in the last 12 months, it's almost 2 weeks. It's basically doubled in about sort of 5 years, which is crazy. I'm not surprised at all. The world is changing rapidly. We have a rise in long-term health conditions, you know, whether diagnosed by a doctor or self-diagnosed. We have an ageing workforce. We have an increase in awareness and a prioritising of mental health, which we didn't have before. You know, there's much more conversations. People take mental health days. If they're feeling stressed or overworked, they'll speak up about it and they will take some time out for themselves. I think as well, obviously, everyone worked in offices pre-COVID. Then COVID came along. Then it was all working from home. And then the government and business were like, no, we're done with that. Everyone back to work. The chopping and changing over the past few years would really take a toll on anyone, I think.
But I also think it's interesting because we talk about sick leave and mental health, but we also have to think about the UK's fragile productivity. You know, people going into the workforce helps the economy, and that's something we can't forget. And the productivity and the GDP, it plays into all the main data points and economic, you know, points and within the country. And the former Marks and Spencer's boss has actually come out and he said the country is on the edge of a crisis. He argues that Britain risks losing its culture of workplace resilience. Michael says we have arrived in a situation in Britain today where there is effectively no obligation to go to work. Do you agree?
I've never lived in the UK, so I can't...
Very diplomatic, yes.
I can't argue specifically against what he has said. But I do think that the majority of people around the world who are not the bosses, but part of the rank and file and proud to be there, recognize that there are so many jobs and they have so many different responsibilities in their job, they know they can do it from home. And while I certainly agree that the economy of a city is dependent upon there being people in the city going to the office, I don't think that most people are too concerned about that. They're concerned about their mental health or their physical health, or they're quite frankly concerned about their comfort or the responsibilities that they have at home for their dogs or for their children or for whatever it is that keeps them in their house.
So I just want to ask a question. We're talking about mental health and, you know, people taking time off work due to stress and mental health days, because we are far more aware of the effects of mental health and stress on our body. But don't you think going home and working from home in a house on your own, possibly, is actually worse for your mental health? Is it not better to be in a workforce, learning by osmosis, asking questions, having those face-to-face meetings, those water cooler chats that are so important?
So I think, yes, in an ideal work environment, but we are 3 adults. How many ideal work environments have you been in? And I think that that's true for a lot of people, which is, some have been really good, some have been really bad. And if you're stuck in a really bad one right now, but you need the job and you can't find the new one, and the company is flexible enough that they maybe allow you a work from home day and maybe you get a couple of sick days or mental health days during the course of a month, you're able to stretch these things out. So the work itself gets done, but it also gets done a little bit more on your terms so that you feel comfortable. What I've seen with a lot of the younger generation now is that they'll be comfortable doing the best they can in 40 hours during the course of a week, 45 hours, whatever it might be. But that's it. Whereas I think certainly my generation, and you guys are a different generation, your generation would feel a certain amount of pride in going that extra step to make sure that you, because part of how we all identify ourselves is through a successful career. I don't know that the younger generation sees it that way.
No, and I think the Lord that you quoted, the former chairman of...
The former Marks and Spencer boss,
Yeah.
Lord Stuart Rose,
said that they're losing a work culture, but maybe it's just changing, and he doesn't understand that nowadays you have no job security, you have the gig economy where young people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to stay afloat, you have the cost of living, and a lord is going to live a very different life to someone, sort of ground level working, these temporary jobs, so...
Yes, but I do think that at the end of the pandemic, remember, there was a massive push to get everyone back into the offices, really for the economies of those cities. And so many people did push back, and they said, actually, we want more flexibility. We prioritise our family. We prioritise our kids. We want to be part of that life. So maybe you're completely right, Gemma.
But flexibility is great, but it just seems it has to be one or the other. You're either in the office 5 days a week or, you're at home. But people do want that flexibility.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of days a week, or the time to take their children to school and be at home when the children come home from school.
Flexible working has been very successful in many companies that have adopted it.
One of the things that I learned in the position that I was in during COVID is that people have different work rhythms.
Yes.
Partly because they have responsibilities at home, but also because we're not all designed to do 9 to 5. Some people like to go to bed at 3 in the morning, and they feel they're most productive on a Saturday at 8 p.m. As long as the project gets done by the deadline, then people should have the flexibility to work wherever they are. And to our Marks and Spencer boss, I would say he's of a generation that sees it either you're at home slacking off or you're in the office. And what needs to happen, and my kids are going to be 29 tomorrow, and I've had this conversation with them, and I've said, we won't learn the work from home benefits from COVID until you guys are in managerial positions where you can make decisions, because you will then start to think outside the box. And that, I think, is part of the issue, is too many of the old white guys are in charge, and they say it's either you're unemployed or you're in the office. And there has to be a different way, and we need people who are prepared to think outside the box.
It's going to be really interesting, as you say, when the generation who are like your sons are then in a managerial position. But I just want to say one thing. My attendance record at school was always 100%, because Vanessa Gerrans, a.k.a. my mother, did not believe in sick days. So I think her and Lord Stuart Ross might have something in common.
They'd have got on very well.
Yeah. Now, it's that time of the show where Michael and Gemma have chosen their stories of the day, so the quirky stories. And Michael, yours is all about the Murdochs and this big media mogul family. We all know about Rupert Murdoch. Finally, a deal over the empire.
So this one is definitely not a quirky one, but it is incredibly interesting. Now, some will say that it's the inspiration for the TV series Succession. I'm not going to comment on that because I never watched that. But I do know that this drama has been playing out in courts in Nevada for a long time. Rupert Murdoch, 94 years old, is well aware that he has probably not too many days left. He is wanting to protect his legacy. And part of that legacy is not just the titles that he owns and the titles that he's created, but it's also the right-leaning editorial strategy that he obviously believes in. His 4 oldest children were part of a trust, and they all had equal voting shares when it came to making decisions. Now, the heir apparent, Lachlan, is somebody who Rupert Murdoch sees as the one who probably comes closest to what he wants for his empire once he's gone. The other 3 are maybe not as conservative as he is. So what's been going on over these many years is trying to break a family trust that, quite frankly, could not be broken. And so they've finally come to an agreement where the 3 other children, 3 of the 4 oldest children, Lachlan will stay in charge, they are being bought out at the tune of about $1.5 billion each.
And I tell you what, I think I'd be happy to be the other 3. You take the $1.5 billion, you don't have the stress of running an empire,
You could be bought out.
You can just be bought
It's a shame
out.
Succession is finished because they've definitely got their next season right there.
Yeah, right
Maybe
there.
a reboot.
Yeah.
I never watched Succession either, I must admit, but I think it's really interesting. And as you say, you know, Rupert Murdoch, 94, he never ever shows any signs of slowing down,
No.
does he, in many respects? But that's a really interesting take on all of it. And Gemma, yours is about a man who's been nicknamed Thor.
The British
and
Thor,
yes,
yeah.
I was wondering if a picture was going to pop up of him on the screen, only because if you see him, you'll see why, basically. And he's basically broken a record for swimming around Iceland.
Yes.
I mean, I just don't know why people do this.
Well, he's an ultra-marathon swimmer.
Right, okay,
Yeah,
yes.
anyone who has ultra in their job title,
concerning.
you know they're doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
He has spent the past 4 months swimming 1,000 miles
Wow.
around Iceland. He was swimming 18 miles a day, that's 30 kilometres a day. He was consuming between 10,000 and 15,000 calories a day, eating pasta and Icelandic licorice, which I'm not sure, you know, what Icelandic licorice is, but it was helping him gain all this weight. And he had to gain 15 kilos of
That's
what he
gaining all this weight?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'd
When
like to...
you're the British
I'd like to
Thor,
look
that
like
is
that,
gaining- yeah, that's
gaining all this weight.
Yeah. He said he was inspired by orcas. Obviously, their blubber is what protects them, keeps them warm, and so he wanted to create his own blubber.
That's blubber?
He looks good on it, though.
He looks great on it, yes. Yes.
But one of the most interesting things about this is that parts of his tongue fell out whilst he was doing this because of the constant, relentless wash of salt water through his mouth. So he has gone in the Guinness Book of Records, but he is missing parts of his tongue.
That is so... I mean, I wonder if your tongue grows back or if it
I don't think
heals.
your tongue does grow. It heals very quickly.
Does it?
Yes, but once a chunk is gone,
It's gone.
It's not regenerating.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Ross Edgley. I mean, why not? You know, lose half your tongue, swim around Iceland,
Yeah.
put on some blubber.
Yeah.
You know, we'd all like to eat pasta.
That would be great, but we're not swimming, 30 kilometres a day to kind of
And do you know, I always
counteract
think
it.
that if you swim in a pool or still water, or even in a dam, essentially, it's much easier. You get into the sea and it's those elements, isn't it? It's the choppiness, it's the tide, it's the waves, it's just the
And he was
non-stop.
visited by pods of orcas. Now that would have terrified me, but
Maybe quite
he said he said he wanted to show that they're not, you know.
Yeah.
They're not that dangerous to humans, but I'm glad that he went and did that.
Was Free Willy an orca?
Yes.
There we are. OK, well, thanks to our guest today, Michael Jabri Pickett, the managing director of This Is Dubai, and columnist Gemma White. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. GNT with Michal Prendergast will be coming up next. Goodbye, and thank you for joining us.